stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, the republic for which it stands. Okay, let's get things going here. The first thing we're going to do is approve the agenda. Does anyone have any changes, additions to the agenda? If not, I guess I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Second by Pat Scripture. All in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay. Agenda is approved 4-0. First thing on the agenda is the 2015 Street and Utility Improvement Project public hearing. Chris, I assume you're going to take that?
I think so. Thank you, Mayor, members of the City Council. Before you tonight is we're having the public hearing for the 2015 Street and Utility Project. I do want to point out for those in the audience, there is an agenda and there is a roster, sign-in roster if you're here for the public hearing. If you could include that, that would be great. Purpose of tonight's meeting, this is part of the Capital Improvements Program. And I want to point out that the area that we're looking at, and I'll get into a little more detail, is the area that was defined in the 2009 Capital Improvements Plan for potential project in 2015 and 2016. Through this study, we've actually recommended and are proposing this whole project to be done in 1 year under the 2015. So this meeting tonight here is part of the public improvement process, Minnesota Statutes 429, which is the statute that allows local governments to do local projects where a portion of the funding is funded through assessments to the benefiting properties. As part of that, we are required to prepare a feasibility study, which we did present to the council at the last council meeting. It is available online on the city's website if anybody wants to see this more in detail. The study basically outlines the improvements as proposed, the recommended or the suggested estimated costs, and recommendations on how the project would be funded. So tonight, again, we're here for the public hearing. Just to let everybody know kind of a little bit of the protocol, how the public hearing works. I'll go through a brief presentation of the project. The council may ask some questions of me or of staff, and then the mayor will turn it over to open the public hearing and allow the residents to comment or ask questions to us. The project that was defined in the feasibility study, again, is the area that was identified in the 2009 Capital Improvements Plan for 2015, 2016 improvements. Go over those briefly. We're looking at First Street. For those of you that can see the diagram up on the screen, this is the neighborhood. The plan is turned sideways. North is to the right, south is to the left. Main Street runs right here. The streets that were in the study, First Street from 390 feet west of 6th Avenue to the alley just short of 4th Avenue. 2nd Street from 6th Avenue to 4th Avenue. 3rd Street from 6th Avenue to 4th Avenue. 5th Avenue from Main Street to just north of 3rd Street. 6th Avenue from Main Street all the way up to 6th Street. The study also did give us an opportunity to consider whether we wanted to do anything with this unplatted portion that's just north of 3rd Street. It follows kind of the 4th Street of alignment, and we've recommended at this time to not do anything with that. So I just wanted to point that out. Some of the things worth pointing out here, the streets and utilities in this neighborhood was basically constructed in about 1980. That's the date of the sewer and the water in most of this area. Prior to that, there may have been some limited sanitary sewer, but the majority of the area was not serviced prior to that. So when we are looking at what we're going to do for this neighborhood, as I mentioned before, we're not looking at a full total reconstruction project, and we'll get into that what's recommended. This neighborhood is in terms of the lifestyle or life cycle of the streets. The curb is generally in pretty good shape. There's some curb that needs some repairs and some replacements. The utilities, for the most part, and I'll get into a few of the exceptions, are good. They've not, there's still a considerable amount of life left in those utilities, the sewer, the water, the storm sewer. So we're looking at improvements that are not a complete reconstruction like we've seen in past projects. We're looking at, for the majority of the area identified in yellow, we're looking at what we call a pavement replacement process. And the area here up in orange, up in the newer section, we're looking at simply a mill and overlay. Real briefly to explain what a pavement replacement is, for the majority of that, we would be looking at a contractor coming in and pulverizing the pavement, grinding up the gravel and the pavement to recycle it, taking some of that excess out, and then basically repaving 2 new lifts of blacktop in that roadway. There is some limited curb, a piece here, piece there, that's about 10 to 15% where the curb maybe is either broke up, settled, that we'd look at replacing those sections of curb. Those may be 10 or 20-foot sections. We're not looking at it overall throughout the project, curb replacement. Same thing in the mill and overlay area. There may be a few pieces of curb that need to be replaced, but that would be simply a mill and overlay. And in that case, the edges are ground milled out to allow room for the new lift of blacktop, and then a new surface is placed over the existing street. So we're looking at improvements that are less invasive, obviously less costly, and the project should go much quicker. One of the things that we didn't necessarily mention at the neighborhood meetings that were held, because this is very limited amount of turf disturbance, we'd be looking at basically a hydroseed or seeding system, where a piece of curb maybe has to be replaced. There'll be a couple feet of turf that'll have to be restored, and that typically would be done with hydroseeding rather than sod. It blends in quicker, matches quicker, and requires less maintenance. Just wanted to point out, I know there's at least one individual here that had some concerns about some discussion we had about Fifth Street. Fifth Avenue. Fifth Avenue is currently a one-way. It's one-way northbound. From what we understand from the neighborhood meeting, that goes back quite a ways to when there was some business or industry up in this area. And there seemed to be a lot of traffic in the mornings leaving there. And at that time, there was a decision made to turn that into a northbound one-way only. We posed the question whether or not there was a reason or if we needed to consider changing that. And basically, the consensus we heard from the neighborhood is leave it as it is. And from our standpoint, we're not proposing a change at this time. There was also some concern brought up whether or not there was a visibility issue. For example, if a car were to pull up down to the south end on Main Street, wanted to look, and if there's cars coming from the west over the vertical curve, whether there be a visibility issue. So at this time, we are not recommending any change to that one way. I do want to point out sidewalks are proposed in some areas where they don't exist. As noted in the report and showing up in the screen here, in 2013, the city adopted a sidewalk and trail plan, and it identified areas or gaps in the system where sidewalks should be considered when we do projects or do improvements. And there are streets in this area that were identified in that plan, and I'll show you that more back in detail here. The segments were here on First Street on the south side along the townhomes here. There's a gap in the sidewalks. There's sidewalk along this stretch of 6th Avenue. There's sidewalk further to the west, but there's none here. And so this would be filling in that gap and replacing the pedestrian ramps to make them ADA compliant. Also to the north on 6th Avenue, up by the businesses and commercial area, from the park up to 6th Street, there is a gap in the sidewalk. We're proposing it behind the back of curb. It will fit just fine. No issues there. The last segment that was presented some challenges was this stretch from 2nd Street, on 2nd Street from 4th Avenue to 6th Avenue. We're showing it along the north side. And there were some challenges, as I mentioned at the last meeting, due to some steep yards, driveways, a number of factors. It was nearly impossible, well, basically impossible to fit it in where the existing curb and street is at. So on this stretch of 2nd Street, and I'm showing it here in plan view, so from 4th, from the highway, 21 to 6th Avenue, we're showing it on the north side. We've actually proposed to narrow that street by 5.3 feet. So basically take the curb line on the north side and shift it south towards the center of the road. And that will accommodate the width required to get that sidewalk to fit in and maintain the driveways at or better than the grade they're at right now. And this was also to maintain the sidewalk to make sure it's ADA compliant. In doing so, the street would be narrowed to 24 feet. As I mentioned before, we have a number of streets in the last few years that we've constructed at those widths. That's for this area, for this neighborhood. That's a completely acceptable width. The only thing is we would be recommending that parking be reduced to one side of that street, just to make sure that there's easy access for two vehicles, two-way traffic on that stretch. Again, and we get into further comment, Ken maybe can make additional comments to that. But again, part of the global comprehensive trail plan is to provide access from the highway on this corridor of 2nd Street, which eventually will connect up to the school. A few of the other things that are proposed, the one exception to the utilities, as I mentioned, the utilities are generally in good shape. Their age is not a factor. However, this stretch of water main on 5th Avenue from Main up to just north of 3rd Street has had an abnormal number of breaks over the years. And for that reason, the Utility Commission has chosen to actually replace that water main. We'll do a system where basically the trench, just an area where the trenching has to be done, will be opened up. Services will be reinstalled and extended out, and that water main would be replaced. Sanitary sewer would be left in place. That doesn't need to be replaced. Storm sewer generally will be all left in place. The exception is a few catch basins that may need some rehabilitation. And I think we have about 3 spot repairs in some of the pipe that we're going to look at what we call a spot lining on the storm sewer. We have a segment of sanitary sewer where we have one area where we are going to have to open cut and remove and replace about 30 feet of pipe due to some settlement, some egg shape in the pipe. This is from doing inspections through televising to determine what needed to be replaced. But the majority of the sanitary sewer is in good shape. As I showed you before, there's some a little bit of abnormalities on some of the joints where those are going to be blasted. Hydroblasted is what it's called, to clean those joints and basically put that pipe in a condition so it can last another 30, 40, 50 years, you know, extend the life of that utility. Getting into the assessment section of this, again, this is a public hearing. This isn't an assessment hearing, but we are presenting information about the assessments, the magnitude of proposed assessments. This hearing is for basically the council to decide whether or not to proceed with the project, and assessments will be considered at a later date during an assessment hearing next fall. The assessments follows the city's assessment policy. Basically, street assessments are a predetermined annually established assessment rate. This year is a little unique in that the improvements that we're doing, we have basically we've not had an opportunity to do these type of improvements for a while, and we've done it very limited. Most of the stuff in the past, all has been complete reconstruction. This is a like I said, a less invasive pavement replacement type project. Reconstruction of the sanitary sewer mains, the storm sewer mains, and the water mains. These are the mainline pipes that are out on the road. Those are paid 100% by the city through those utility funds, the sewer utility fund, the water utility fund, and the stormwater utility fund. Reconstruction of sanitary sewer services and water services. These are the laterals that go from the property line out to the mainline pipe. When those are replaced, those are assessed basically at basically 100% of that cost, and are assessed at an established rate based on historic costs. And I'll get a little bit more information on what that means. What I've showed here on this table is the assessment rates highlighted in yellow that really affect this project. And for reference, I've showed assessment rates for last year. Starting with the water service lines, we are proposing about a 5% increase based on what we were observing for increased costs in water service piping. This year, in 2014, the assessments were 1,210. We're proposing an assessment rate for next year of 1,270. These are for the water service lines. This would just affect the properties on Fifth Avenue where the water main is being replaced. Sanitary sewer services, at this time, we are not anticipating any replacements. The exception might be we will send out a questionnaire to the residents to find out if people are having any known problems with their sewer service. If they need to have it replaced, this is certainly the time to do it, and we would arrange to have that done under the project, but it'd be through an agreement, similar to a couple of situations we had this past year. In 2014, the numbers I'm showing here were for the full reconstruction type project. To show you again the magnitude here, we're looking at street assessments this past year of nearly $8,000 for residential and over $10,000 for commercial. That doesn't apply to this project this year because we're not doing full reconstruction projects. We're looking at a project where we are replacing the pavement. We're calling it pavement replacement reclamation, as I noted before. We did not have anything like that in 2014. The last project we had was in 2010 where we actually did a reclamation project. It was over on Pershing and 5th Street Northwest. And again, we were looking at $4,100 per unit. Based on the increases we've seen over the last few years, we're proposing, we've recommended an assessment rate of $4,600 per unit for the residential, $5,980 per unit commercial. The commercial will pay basically, according to policy, 130% of what the residential rates are. And I'll get into briefly defining what a unit is. The mill and overlay, again, that's on a section of road that's somewhat younger. It's actually the opportune time to overlay it. It would be actually our preference on any kind of secondary type improvement would be to do an overlay. Typically, you're doing that in about somewhere around that age 20 years or so. Well, the streets and the majority of this neighborhood are beyond that, and so we are really having to go to that reclamation process. So for the overlay, it only affects commercial properties, and the recommended assessment rate is $2,600 per unit. Get into what that means by unit. The policy as it's defined is really to look at residential equivalent units. So basically, single-family residential property, one house, one property, one unit. Doesn't matter if it's 80-foot frontage or 100-foot frontage, 60-foot frontage. Everybody pays a one-lot type, one-unit assessment. For commercial properties, we basically look at a comparable number of lots on their frontage. So in this example, here's a residential lot, residential lot, residential lot, and projected across to the commercial side is approximately 3 units. That's how we would look at it. For corner properties, it depends whether or not there's improvements on both sides. If it's improvements only occurring on one side of a corner lot, they'd get a half a unit under the current project, and they'd get a half a unit under a future project. If it's somebody that lives on a corner and both sides of the street are being done, they get a half a unit, 1 unit. And so those would be how those unit assessments would be applied. Briefly, to summarize the cost of this project, the estimated project costs are summarized here below. The whole total project is estimated at just over $1.3 million. Of that, 769,000 or 59% is street improvements, 164,454 or 13% is sidewalk improvements. This includes some of the costs to remove and replace curb on 2nd Street. Sanitary sewer improvements, these are the spot repairs, the cleaning of the joints, etc., rehabilitating that sanitary sewer at $106,000. Water system improvements, basically replacement of that main on 5th Avenue and some valve replacements, just under $234,000 or 18%. Storm sewer improvements, $32,000 or about 2% to bring us up to that just over $1.3 million. And these are total project costs. So this includes not only construction, but project-related costs, design, engineering, administrative, fiscal. Now, if we break that down on the recommended or proposed financing, the sanitary sewer utility covers about $106,000 or 8%. Water utility, again, just under $201,000 or 15%. Storm water utility, just under $16,000 or 1%. State aid, as I noted last week, the stretch of 6th Avenue is part of the city's state aid street system, and so we can utilize state aid funds to help subsidize some of the costs and reduce the impact on the tax levy. That's estimated at $353,486 or 27% of the cost of the project. Assessments, which are the contribution from the neighborhood, estimated at $448,000 and change or 34% of the cost of the project. And general levy picking up the balance here of just over $181,000 or 14%, again, to bring us up to that $1.3 million. Lastly, to again look at that as a breakdown of neighborhood versus citywide contribution. Again, neighborhood contribution, $448,070 or 34%, which is again from assessments. Citywide contribution, which is all these other funds, the utility funds, state aid, and general levy. That citywide picking up $857,675 or 66%. Again, to bring us up to that $1.3 million. The proposed schedule, as outlined in the report, we're here at the public hearing tonight on December 1st. We'd be looking at beginning design immediately following council approval. We'd be looking at coming back in mid-February at the second meeting to present final plans and get authorization to advertise for bids. And the project would advertise in February and March, and we'd be looking at a bid opening in mid-March with a council award on April 6th. The construction on this, we're estimating at about 10 weeks for the bulk of construction. And the way we'll probably actually write this contract is that we'll allow the contractor to start in a certain time frame. So not necessarily on May 1. Maybe we'll give them till mid-June or something. But then once they start, the clock will start ticking. If they started on mid-May, I'd expect that this job would be done substantially complete by about first part of July. So we're talking about a project that's going to go much quicker and a lot cleaner than the projects that we've seen in the recent past. So we'll give a little flexibility on that start time, and that'll provide some competition for the contractors, give them some flexibility. We'd be looking at September of declaring costs and ordering their assessment roll and holding the assessment hearing in October. And at that point, the assessments would be levied to the county in November. With that, I'll turn it over to you for any questions you may have of me or staff. And otherwise, at that point, Mayor, you can open up the public hearing at that point.
Okay. Maybe, Chris, maybe you should explain a little bit by combining the project into, rather than 2 years, combining into 1 year, and the cost savings that is creating to the city.
Very good question. Thank you, Mayor. You have to put this in a frame of reference that back in 2009, when we were looking at that project, the area, we didn't have a lot of answers. We had a lot of assumptions, but we'd also been in the basically the history of just total reconstruction and replacing the roads and utilities. We've been doing a lot of head scratching over the years, and I knew when this neighborhood came up that we had to take a little closer look at really what needed to be done, and felt that this may be a project where it would be less invasive. We'd be looking at something like a pavement replacement type project. Number one, that was a project that's costing the city a lot less money. There's a lot of efficiencies here by combining this because all the improvements are very similar. We're going to do very similar work in these neighborhoods. We have the efficiency of, we don't have a lot of overlap, meaning whenever you do projects, you got an end point and a start point, and sometimes you always end up overlapping at an intersection. You've got, if you do this as 2 projects, you're doing 2 feasibility studies, you're doing 2 designs, 2 biddings, 2 contracts. And so there's just a lot of efficiency there. So that's presenting a savings to the city as well. So, and the magnitude of the cost of the project, again, at 1.3 million is a much preferable size than if we were to break this up into 2 smaller projects.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Chris?
I just have one, Chris. The water main on 5th Street there, how many breaks did?
I think, Bruce, you had mentioned 7 in recent years.
Was that many? Yeah. Oh, okay. And that was put in 1980? Is that
About 1980.
different material now when it gets
Well,
replaced,
yes,
or-
we're using PVC now. We've been using PVC now for well over 10 years. So I think we don't really know why it's breaking, but obviously we can't. It will be a big concern if we were to leave it in place.
Any other questions from the council at all? Okay, this is a public hearing, so if you do want to make a comment, we'd appreciate if you would come to one of the microphones up here, state your name and your address, and give us your comment. So it is open. No one has any comments to make? Okay. Based on that, I guess I'll look for a motion to close the public hearing.
So move.
Got a motion by Mark Bartuszczyk, second by Dave Brusick to close the public hearing. Everyone in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay, the public hearing is closed. Next on the agenda is the resolution ordering improvement and preparation of the plans. Any other questions for Chris at this time, or?
I move to accept it.
Okay, I got a motion by Mark Bartuszczyk and a second by Sean Ryan to approve the resolution ordering improvement and preparation of the plans. So if there's no further comment, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition?
Aye.
Okay, passes 4-1. Next on the agenda is consider proposal for engineering services with SEH. You want to just go over the, Glenn, just want to kind of summarize them for us, please?
Yep. SEH turned in a proposal this year for the 2015 CIP project. After looking at the past years and comparing the quantity of the work that has to be done on this project compared to past years, being everything from the total scope of the project, everything is in line with their proposal as far as the percentages go for the cost, total cost of the project compared to the cost of different tasks involved, which the tasks are inspections on the job, doing as-built, things like that. All those percentages are in line for the last, since 2011, and they're all about the same, like within less than 0.01%. So with that, my recommendation is to have SEH do the engineering services for the 2015 CIP project.
Okay, and is that the 181 that we're looking at? Or the
225, 500 total.
Okay.
Right.
I think the 181 would be the new contract, the addition to the current. The 225, I believe, is the final bottom
The
line.
previous fee
Including
was
the
for the feasibility
feasibility
report up till now.
That's correct.
And we did end up with a savings on the feasibility study that's reflected in the proposal as well.
Okay. Okay, any questions regarding the proposal for engineering services with SEH? If not, I guess I'll make a motion to approve the proposal for engineering services with SEH.
Second.
I got a second by Dave Brusick. Any other further comment? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition?
Aye.
Okay, passes 4-1. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Looking forward to it.
Here, a couple of other clarifications that Chris didn't touch on. On the sidewalk improvements that are put in, there is no assessment on the sidewalks. The city picks it up at 100%. The overall financing for the project is done by the city, and we're able to spread that over 15 years for homeowners if they so choose. When we get to the end of the project and the engineer determines the amount of the assessment, and we have a preliminary assessment roll-up in case anybody's interested in what their approximate assessment might be. The engineers have done some calculations there, but that can be spread over 15 years, and we charge an interest rate of 1.5% over what our cost of borrowing is when we go out to sell bonds. So it's a pretty favorable interest rate that way, but we can answer any questions that people might have if they want to place a phone call either to Glenn or to our office. We can give you a general idea of what that might amount to.
One comment, and it obviously can be discussed prior to the assessments, is due to the size of these assessments, there may be a consideration for actually lesser years, potentially.
But the council can look at that
Yep.
either 10 to 15 years in that range.
Okay.
Mike, just for the benefit of the public, could you also say that there's some deferments that? There is eligibility for those that are senior citizens or that meet certain income requirements that I believe it's age 65 or older, age and or income can be addressed through the city's special assessment policy. And you'd be able to answer those questions or? Answer those as well.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, looks like, Ken, are you going to take this conditional use permit?
I have a brief PowerPoint for you tonight for the conditional use permit for motor vehicle sales at the old West End Pit Stop gas station at 401 West Main Street. Take a look at the property. It's across the street from Chameleon Coffee, Skuzacek's Meat Market, the West End Liquor Store, just west of the railroad tracks and east of Highway 21, 19, and 13 where they all intersect there. It's zoned B3 highway commercial. We did have a public hearing at the November 19th Planning Commission meeting to review this request. We did have a public hearing. We did not have any public comment received other than from the owner of the site, Mr. Izzat Minhas, who's actually SSA&M Inc., who owns the site, and no other general public comments were received. The owner, Nathan Green, of the applicant, Nate Sato, was also at the meeting. The comment that Mr. Minhas provided was only specific to the deadline of getting the parking lot paved after the removal of the tanks. I had put in the staff report a recommendation of June 1, 2015 to have the site repaved. And if you go over there right now, it's all obviously tore up. The tanks were removed a couple of days after the Planning Commission meeting. And Mr. Minhas asked for an additional year to June 1, 2016. I do want to note at the very end of the packet, we did receive comments from Russ Schierick, who wrote on behalf of his father, Larry Schierick, who provided comments via email. And basically, the considerations were regarding making sure that people stay off of his property. Specifically, one comment, he had believed that our staff report recommended fencing along the sidewalk on Main Street, which we did not, so that I did clarify that with Mr. Schierick. The other comments were he actually has a private driveway, or his father has a private driveway on the west side or east side of the applicant's site, and wanted to ask if we could require a fence to be placed there. There hasn't been a fence there ever, and I addressed that with him and actually suggested if they wanted to put up their own fence, they could do so, being private property. And the other comment was, again, regarding fencing between some planters on what would be the north side of the site and Mr. Schierick's property. And again, my suggestion was that being private property, they could install fencing as they deemed fit. Regarding the paving of that parking lot, was probably the biggest portion of discussion that we had at the meeting between the Planning Commission and the applicant and the site owner. And did want to note that we had the meeting on November 19th and the tanks were taken out on the 20th. But specifically, my concern from a staff level is based on having dates too far out in the future for these conditional use permits, is that they tend to get forgotten about. Financial considerations being the reason for having this extended can also cause problems down the road if the appropriate money isn't set aside for that. And it just prolongs the inevitable need to get that lot paved. The zoning ordinance does require that parking areas be paved. The reason that we even have a 2015 by June 1 pavement deadline was because we have obviously winter and would not be possible to pave the site over the winter time, and actually might not be a bad thing to have the gravel and subbase settle over the winter and spring months. So in the end, the Planning Commission did feel that the extension of the paving date out to June 1, 2016 was worth the improvements being made at the site. I did not agree with that assessment at the meeting, but they did feel that the removal of the tanks, the removal of the canopy, and having a operating business in there was a good trade-off. So I do want to point out that is what the Planning Commission's discussion was on that item.
Ken? What was the owner's reason for delaying it a year?
The main reason was financial. The cost of removing the tanks was roughly $18,000, tanks in the canopy, excuse me. And it was another, I think he indicated $5,000 to $6,000 to have that paved up front, and that was a lot of money to put up front. And that was the explanation from the applicant. So you can take that for what it's worth.
Was the Planning Commission, 100% of the Planning Commission in favor of delaying it?
We had 3 members present at the Planning Commission meeting. 2 were absent. So yes, we had 100%, 3 that were there that did recommend approval by extending that date out an additional year. Another noteworthy item would be regarding in the staff report, condition number 13. We had a condition actually initially drafted regarding a recommendation, MnDOT wanting the closure of the western access to the site from the site to the highway. Scott Riggs took a look at that initial recommendation and recommended very strongly that we remove that condition from our set of conditions. Reason being is that the city is not the permitting authority for the highway, and we knew the applicant, the owner of the site, actually would likely challenge the closing of that access without compensation, I might add. And due to that, we removed the condition. Since that time, MnDOT did note that they will not be requiring the closure of that access at this time. Don't exactly know. They never cited any specific authority. They had to close that road, so the issue was kind of dropped at that point. So there is no access that will be closed at this point, and that's where we're leaving it. It's basically in MnDOT's hand if they want to address it in the future with any future reconstruct of the highway. Just another close-up view of the property here. Specifically the driveway that leads into Mr. Shurick's residence to the north is located outside. You can kind of see the blue property lines. They are not accurate. I want to note that. The property line does not run through the middle of the building. But generally speaking, the representation here from the county property records is that the applicant's property does not include the driveway that runs up to Mr. Shurick's private residence. But there are 2 curb cuts, one located on the west side, east side of the site, and another on the west side of the site. So it's kind of a ability to loop through for traffic concerns, which actually is very valuable as a fueling station and could continue to be useful as a auto car sales. Pictures of the site. This is a canopy, obviously, that was taken down. We are requiring in the conditions that they, even on the existing building, you can see the picture on the lower right-hand corner here with the site in the current condition, tanks removed. MPCA was out there, did document it. There was a soil test done. MPCA basically takes up to 10 days to determine if they need to do any further work on the site, if there were any leaks or anything. We don't know that answer at this point, but one of the conditions is they have to meet all MPCA requirements. But again, you can see the flaking and chipping paint on the building that will need to be repainted by June 1 of 2015 per the conditions. Another view of the site. You can see the pavement that was on the site was actually very, very poor condition. It was more of patches on patches, I guess is probably the best way to put it. And it actually has a more uniform appearance with the reclaimed gravel and things over the top of it. So vastly improved appearance even without all the conditions being complied with by painting the building and such. So a couple more photos there, pre-tank removal.
What's that little building on the property?
That's actually the well monitoring building that was required on the site. There actually are still monitoring wells on the property from the 1990 fuel leak that took place. They have to remain The wells can remain active until the applicant removes them. He's not required to do so. MPCA does charge a monitoring fee. So it's really up to the applicant if they want to keep monitoring the site. There's no reason to. The site has been closed out as far as the 1990 fuel leak. So he indicated, at least for the short term, would want to keep that building and the wells on the site.
Ken, would it be possible for the city to maybe require at least a monitoring of that once at this time to find out if there is any further effect from the contaminated soils?
There actually would be no reason. The MPC actually has closed the former leak site out with the current testing of the soil that was done when the tanks were removed back on, actually it was Friday of the week following, so I believe the 21st of November. The samples that were taken, they'll determine if they need to reopen a leak site. And at that point, it's really in MPC's hand, not so much the city's. But I do believe condition number 1 of the resolution covers that. Obviously, if they have a remediation to be done, they can't operate and start operation of that. So that's our main trigger to keep anything from moving forward until that is cleaned up. And obviously, we've been working with MPCA to make sure that the tanks were removed. And owner's been very compliant to this point as well, regardless of even having a condition to do that. Obviously, he removed the tanks before it became a requirement for the site here. So, final picture.
Is there any stipulation that will disallow him from parking on the grass?
They do have to park on paved areas, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that is a zoning ordinance requirement.
Ken, is there any agencies that we know of, or any way we could loan them the money so that they could do this by June?
We can certainly, and the interesting thing is we have a applicant that is not the owner of the site. So, if the applicant wanted to put his own money into doing it, that would be one thing. I don't know if he would purchase a site in the future or not, but we do have different resources we can refer small businesses to for different loans and that type of funding. Not necessarily free money, but money to help small businesses get off the ground. So certainly can refer them to that route. Obviously, regardless of whatever deadline we set, would like it to be done even before June 1, 2015, if that is a choice that the council takes to set the date at. So they do agree that curb appeal is much better with a paved lot. Obviously, to keep vehicles cleaner. We do have, and I did explore with the applicant, having gravel remaining that site. If anything's drug out into the street, they will be required to clean it. We have that concern with the mill adjacent to the site, obviously to the east a bit. And the question was raised at the meeting, I should point out, why other lots, specifically the mill, do not have a paved lot, even though it's a zoning ordinance requirement. And basically it goes back to the fact that it's been there, over 100 years, and it's grandfathered in. This site was paved and has been brought back to an unpaved condition, and would basically makes it out of compliance. So they do understand they want to get it paved, need to get it paved. It's just that date that they're trying to push further out. So I personally do not recommend it from a professional standpoint extend it any further than that June timeframe.
Glenn, are there any issues you see with that remaining gravel versus being paved?
The bigger issue that we talked about, or the one issue that we talked about, is them dragging the gravel out onto the highway and being kind of a maintenance headache on the highway. When me and Ken talked about it, there's a restaurant there and there's other businesses there, and yeah, that could be an issue.
Well, it's even happening now, is it not? I mean, when I go there, I can see gravel on that side of the road.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to depend on the traffic in and out. I just don't know how much that's going to be, but yeah.
Or like when they're snow plowing it or something, they'll put that over.
Well, legally, they're not supposed to push their snow out into a state highway, so hopefully they'll keep it onto their property. So, yeah, but you're right. That could be a problem.
Not only the fact that there's a restaurant there, but that restaurant has outdoor seating. I mean, if people are gonna be trying to enjoy the patio out front there, you know, is there the dust issues and everything else getting kicked up and blown across the street and?
Yeah.
I think, Glenn, what you were referring to is that across the street near the restaurant, the meat market, it is a gravel road currently, I think is the point you were making.
Well,
potentially.
there's a gravel road right next to the meat market, but if this is going to be bringing out a lot of gravel onto the highway with the businesses across the street, you're right, there's just going to be a dust issue. There's going to be gravel on the highway.
Right. And
Things
then,
like that.
you know, the same thing could potentially exist as well from the meat market, except you have the meat market there that's shielding the building itself is shielding the
Gravel Road.
restaurant.
Right. But back to this lot, yeah, if there's a lot of traffic in and out of there and it's a gravel lot, potentially you're going to end up with a lot of gravel on the highway.
I'd agree with Ken that I'd like to see it paved in a more timely fashion.
I would
You
too.
know.
I would too.
That action, as you take a look at the conditions and the recommendations from planning and zoning, at the end, when you get ready to take that action, is where you would need to modify the recommendation if you so choose.
Yes, that actually leads me into, you do have a resolution in front of you tonight for consideration that would allow the motor vehicle sales on the site with the 7 findings and then 12 conditions listed, and noting specifically the condition for the pavement of that lot currently as written from the Planning Commission's recommendation as number 3, has the date of June 1, 2016. So if that's the point you want to change, it is in condition number 3.
Ken, does the property line go right behind the building? Because there's another small building, is that Larry Shurick's?
It is, the property line is directly behind the north side of the building there. And
Okay.
the other building is a shed. It's actually down elevation quite a ways. You can't, there's kind of a wall on the applicant's property here, and it's Mr. Shurick's shed, correct?
Okay. Yeah, because there's like a half wall there, right?
Correct. Yep.
They're
So it
planning
actually
to-
sits below the,
They're planning to leave that?
yeah, that would intend to stay there at this point.
Okay. Any other questions?
Can we agree on a date to change the paved concrete? I mean, I think Pat and Dave are in favor of making it sooner than later.
Yes.
And then we could help them find a small business loan or whatever.
We can refer them to resources.
Did you guys have a date in mind? Did I read you right, Dave? That
I
you-
would put it back to 2015.
Yeah, June 1st, 2015.
I'd be fine with that, too.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
I will make a motion to approve the conditional use permit, subject to that condition number 3, that the date be changed to June 1st, 2015.
I'll second.
Okay, got a motion to approve the conditional use permit with the exception of item number 3, changing the date of the paved concrete or bituminous condition no later than June 1st, 2015. I got a motion by Dave Bruce, second by Sean Ryan, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay, passes 5-0 with that change. Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Ken.
Next on the agenda is the water fund and electric fund budget. For Dave's clarification, we kind of went over it in detail after the truth in taxation because we had no public response here, so we decided to kind of go in through the detail. So
Okay, that's fine.
Bruce and Patty are going to do a quick summary.
It's fine.
Go ahead, Bruce.
30 seconds or less.
On behalf of the Utilities Commission, I'm going to present the 2015 proposed budgets. Before doing that, I'm going to go through just a few of the accomplishments made in 2014 that were budgeted for 2014. Starting with the Water Department, we completed our AMR project, which is automated meter reading, which allows us to read meters remotely versus having to go to each individual house. This was a process that involved changing about 2,600 meters and has been done over the last several years. It's reduced our meter reading time from having 3 men read meters for 2 to 3 days to 1 man about a half a day. We also replaced one of our 6 wells this past year, both the piping and the pumping system. We did upgrades to our SCADA control system and the water system. We started our GIS mapping program, which is a geographic information system. Allows us to really place our water infrastructure maps on top of aerial photos that are given to us by Scott County and other entities too. But shows our piping and our valving and our curb stops to within 6 inches of where they actually are. And as we did the electrical system last year, and we're doing the water system this year, and it's proved to be a very valuable tool. Allows guys to do a lot of neat things and show a lot of detail to mapping right from their desk, so to speak. We also did about $130,000 worth of CIP projects in conjunction with the city street CIP projects in 2014. On the electric side, we made a removal of an old substation located on the north side of the power plant on the north side of Highway 19. We converted that to an underground switching station there, so kind of got rid of that eyesore in that area. That unit was actually installed in the 40s sometime, we think, and was now replaced. We placed all of the underground, all of the existing overhead utilities. We placed them underground on the project that'll be taken on next year as a CIP project on the west side of Highway 21. We tried to do that a year ahead of the city's CIP project to be done next year so that we're not in their way. We replaced a roof on one of our line department garages. We installed catalyst on 2 of our generation units that we use for load control peaking. And we spent about $222,000 in CIP projects overall in the electric utility in 2014. As I went over earlier with you in regards to the kind of the details of the budget, at the New Prague Utilities Commission meeting on Monday, November 24th, the Commission approved the 2015 electric and water budgets. The electric budget's proposed budget reflects a 2% increase in KWH and demand rates with no increase to customer service-based charges for 6 of the 7 rate plan classes. Large industrial customers will see about a 10% increase in demand rates only, which is a portion of the rate that affects our total purchase power. And we have found that to be somewhat out of line. Met with the customer, went over what those implications were going to be for his budgets, and more or less he knew it was coming, put it that way. On the water budget, we propose a 0% increase to residential and commercial rates. However, in an effort to reduce the need of the water department to bond 100% of its annual capital improvement cost and to reduce future principal and interest cost, the 2015 budget does reflect a $5 increase to monthly service fees. It is recommendation of the staff and the commission that the council and mayor approve the 2015 electric and water budgets and rates as they were presented.
Any questions? I think we've had it. Dave, do you have any
No.
questions? Okay. Okay. I guess if there's no questions, I guess I'll look for a,
Motion, so moved.
what's that? Can we do both of them at once, Mike, or, yeah, okay. That's what I was, I guess I'm looking for a motion. I guess Pat Scripture has made a motion to approve the both water and electric, Pat?
Yes.
water and electric budget,
For 2015.
2015. I guess I'll make a second on that. There's no further discussion. All in favor of accepting the water and electric budget for 2015, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay. Passes 5-0. Again, good job, Bruce. Patty, thank you. Next on the agenda, Mike, are you going to take this with?
We've got the chairman of the golf board and Wade here on behalf of GME that I can provide a summary or I can let them talk, your preference.
You guys want to step forward?
I guess I didn't prepare anything, Mike. If you want to,
I can do a bit of an overview and I'll let you
sure.
supplement if that's okay. That at the November 19th council budget workshop is that you reviewed and approved kind of the outline of the proposed 2015 golf budget with the new proposed agreement numbers for golf management GME, Golf Management Enterprises. I forgot a word on the agenda, excuse me. The proposal for 2015 is $114,760 for 15 and $119,760 for 2016. This is up from the current year 2014 at $89,760. I'll let them go into a little bit of the summary. You heard most of the discussion at the November 19th meeting. I did clarify in my memo to you that I thought there was some confusion and need for clarification on whether Exhibit B was included or not included in the contract. There is a recommendation from the golf board on that, so I'll let Tom talk about that. So the action tonight is your consideration of the agreement. We'll adopt the final budget on the December 15th meeting. But there was a vote at the golf board this past week on the 25th by a vote of 4-0. 3 were absent to recommend that the proposed 15-16 GME agreement contain Exhibit B. And I'll let them touch a little bit more on that and maybe talk a little bit about some of the reasonings and some of the history and the analysis for changing the agreement as is proposed.
Yeah, I guess the major points of the new contract is number one, it's a 2-year contract versus 1-year contract, which the board was in favor of. Obviously, the contract price is the largest change, and then after that, there's really no major functional changes with the contract as it stood previously. I guess, is there any questions from the council as far as our discussion, or I'm not quite sure where you'd like me to take my commentary?
Hey, Mike, do we have an estimate what we think the bonus could be or the incentive plan could be for this year?
I've not sat down, nor has Patty at this point done any calculations. I think Wade has looked at it, and I believe from the preliminary discussion that occurred at the last golf board meeting is that it could be somewhere up in the range of the positive revenues over expenditures in the range of 30 to 35,000 up to 40 that would then trigger because of the requirements in the contract were, number one, that the number at the end of the year has to be positive, which it would be after going through the analysis, and that it has to be greater than the previous year's operating revenue minus expenses, adding back depreciation. So it's somewhat hard to give you an exact number at this point, pending mostly here in December we'll have expenses, not an awful lot of revenues, minimal holiday party events that we've got, but I think the numbers that they looked at, if memory serves me correct, is it could be somewhere in the range of 30 to 40,000 on the plus side under the formula in Exhibit B as to what would amount to, and then so we'd have to compare that to current, the previous year, 2013, where there was a loss of about 18,000, so it depends on what that differential will be. That the end result for 14 will be positive. What that actual differential will be will dictate where it falls in with that Exhibit B.
So basically, if it's between 30 and 40, it's between 4,500 and 6,000.
I think that's what we were approximating at the golf board meeting.
Okay. Anyone have any other comments or questions?
I was kind of wondering why we didn't have a committee like we had in the past that did this. How was it exactly? Who went over all the?
Yeah, I'm not sure that committee was formed, I'm assuming by the city council. The golf board didn't form that committee as far as the actual contract negotiations. So we took on the contract discussions through the board with Wade and his group, so.
Okay.
I think that was kind of more our decision, really, not to do anything. I mean, not our, but I mean, I don't think we kind of left it at leaving it under the golf board.
Yeah, I mean,
You know,
that,
even after, at the end of last year, which kind of just,
When did we decide that? I don't remember.
well, we didn't
being
decide anything,
asked.
but I mean, I think there was no discussion. At the end of the last committee meeting we had, we really didn't have any discussion of that it needed to be done again.
Oh, well, I thought even the time before that, there was the committee, no?
There was a committee,
GME first came in to manage the club.
yeah, that was the only time we had
Okay.
we had that, and then we did it the last year, but we didn't do it the times between there. There was only 2 committees.
Okay, so we changed our mind, decided not to do it.
Well, I don't know if we changed our mind, we just really never discussed it,
Yeah,
you know, so I think we kind of, from, at least my perspective is we kind of just let it in the golf board's hands.
so the golf course, they went over the contract and everything, and did the attorney look at the contract?
It's the same contract as,
Golf board, I mean, went over the contract?
They were provided the contract, yes.
and contract hasn't changed since the last contract, correct?
There's really no significant
Except
language
dates.
changes other than the dates in the first section and then the payment terms and I have it on my phone. I don't know if that's section 3 or 4.
It is Section 3.
And then there also is the service provider's assignment that we would have to add an additional personnel to that would be subject to background checks by the city. So other than that, there isn't anything significantly that changes in the contract that would need an additional attorney review unless that's something that the council wanted to recommend.
Wasn't there something in the contract, though, about another 3%, how we gave you that 2% raise, and then, when's that all going to be decided?
that's a good question. I guess the golf board isn't quite aware of the exact timing when that needs to be decided by, but I would assume by year's end or before the final audited numbers for 2014 come through, but I'm expecting the golf board would take that into consideration here in December or January, or I guess at a time frame when Mike tells us we need to.
So that wording's out of here, right?
I believe that additional 3% is out of the contract.
Yeah, there is no specific language in the contract around that.
I was just reading, like, on the first page, whereas, the third whereas, and it's saying 2012 and 13, doesn't that need to be changed?
Yes.
Yeah, that would have to change.
That should be
15
15 and
16.
16.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. That's why I just, I don't know. I don't read it over that thoroughly, that maybe there's other stuff. Have you read it over, Mike? And you read it
I already had that noted to change in the final draft. What you see in front of you is what Wade prepared.
This is my attorney legal fees provided with my updates.
Oh, okay, Wade did this, okay.
Yes.
Yeah, this is my update. This didn't come from anyone but me. So like I said, nothing changed dramatically other than the term in section 1 and then the compensation in section 3. So I took it upon myself to be the attorney.
Okay.
There's no structural changes other than date and dollar amounts, and as well what Wade identified in section 5, where right now that the following persons that are engaged under this is Wade Broad and Kurt Reeling. There'd have to be an ad for Nick Pexa, I believe would be your other person.
Right. We did spend a number of cycles and sessions on this base contract back in 2011. I'm not sure that we need to do any additional reviews in regards to the base contract.
Okay. And then the reason you're bringing this, Mike, is because at our workshop, Wade said he would take the bonus away, but then the golf board added it back. What's happened there?
Right, yeah, the golf board had significant discussion on the incentive bonus. I believe that was part 3, Mike. You referred to, was that part 3 or?
Exhibit B.
Or Exhibit B. And, yeah, and that discussion was brought up to the golf board, that potentially that incentive, that Wade and GME would be willing to consider removing that if needed. But the golf board felt that the incentive program was a good idea and voted to keep that piece of the puzzle in the contract.
Okay, was that all the members?
There were 2 board members that were absent, but it was a 5-0 vote, yeah.
What was your take on it, Sean?
After the discussion, it was, we felt we really wanted to keep that in there so they could have an incentive to keep the cash flow increasing and going. We all feel that it's going to be a pretty tough stretch this year with some of the gains that they've made. But they should be rewarded if they can produce a positive cash flow.
Okay.
I just don't particularly like it because we don't do that for any other city employees, or, well, they aren't actually city employees, but, you know.
The private
They all seem
company,
to
though.
do their-
Completely
This is
different.
A private company
This is completely
running the
different.
golf operation.
Completely different, and they're very deserving of it. I was on this board when that thing was a whole, so I'm pretty happy with the way it is right now, so I got no problem with it.
Mike, do you have any problem with it at all, or?
Well, the challenge is that we've put together a program and a contract outline. The dollars are what the council has to balance. You sat through the budget presentation on the 19th of November and took a look at that and already tentatively approved the budget with these numbers in that. What I had conveyed at that meeting is because you didn't formally have the contract in front of you, is that would be an action that you would take tonight. And I was the one personally that wasn't certain whether Exhibit B was included or not. It went back to the golf board. They're making the recommendation on that this evening, and with the final budget adoption on December 15th. The reason you needed the action on the 19th was to give GME the opportunity to start working to get our rates advertised for recruitment of memberships for 2015.
You know, and I never asked you in the workshop what you thought about the $25,000 increase, which is a 28.7% increase. What's your opinion on that?
You know, that's an easy one to ask after the fact that you've already tentatively approved those numbers in the budget. Would I like it to be less? Sure. Why wouldn't I? But you approved, you listened to the program recommendations from Wade and from Councilmember Ryan coming off that golf board at the November 19th meeting, and so tentative action was already taken by this council. So it's kind of difficult for me to weigh in at this point whether I'd recommend anything different. We don't obviously have a lot of alternatives sitting here today to choose to do anything other than work with GME at the present time. Whether that contract could be reduced or modified, I think that discussion occurred on the 19th. Sure, I'd like to pay less, but as you take a look at where this has gone, is that what alternatives do I have to lay on the table for you as an alternative to saying we should pay something less versus Wade making a decision that if we were to do that at a lesser number, would he continue to provide the services? you know, that's a roll of the dice right now in that process.
This contract can also be voided, given a 30-day notice if we're not meeting performance goals that we have set out in front of you with the budget. So really, at any time, I can be given notice, and 30 days later, you know, the contract ends. Obviously, if we do something with cause, that it can be terminated within 24 hours. So there is an opportunity for council to take action and terminate the contract, and give us 30 days to get out, basically, so.
If you look in your packet, I did include
Right, but, you know, like Mike's sort of alluding to, too, it's, you know, we're already, you know, it's probably bad timing right now to look at any other alternatives.
I think
Well, maybe we should do something, look during next year to see if there is anything else, or,
I'm not gonna direct anybody to do that. If you wanna do that, you go right ahead, but we got a good deal going right here.
This is my opinion on the incentive program. You know, I see the pros and cons. One thing I do see is that because of the increase of their contract, it's going to be harder. They're going to have to generate more revenue to get to this incentive program, because now instead of whatever it was, 89,000, it's going to be 114. You know, so right there, they're starting basically, you know, 20-some thousand behind already before day one starts. So from my standpoint, I can see your point, but I also can see that it's going to be harder for them to achieve their incentive due to the contract. So it's kind of like,
I think I heard you say that last year, just about the 3% that they'll, you know, never get 80 or something.
well, I don't know about last year, but I'm just saying that 3%, you know, was a thing. But my thing is, on this, again, if you leave it in or take it out, I don't know, my gut feel is to generate enough revenue to cover those expenses it's not a one-to-one thing. I think they're going to have to do more, in my opinion. But
Well, I didn't vote for it in the workshop, and I'm not voting for it now. I think it's, 25,000 is too much, especially when taxpayers are still contributing $121,270 every year. I just can't, if they weren't, it'd be an easier decision, but it just isn't when that's happening still. You know, the whole goal, I thought, was to make it self-supporting again, because it is an enterprise fund, and it is supposed to be self-supporting by law. And that's the goal that we're trying to reach, but then we keep digging a deeper hole by making the expenses more. It's just my opinion, so.
mhm.
I'm not saying that they aren't doing a good job, you know.
The expenses, though, Pat, are at the level that we were paying our city employee, the Gulf Pro. That hasn't changed. We'd be paying him $114,000, or roughly that, with the cost of living increases for the past 4 years. He was at $108,000 back in 2010 when he was let go.
And in the
And if you add
bonus.
the extra $6,000 difference, you're going to be there. We have 2 people. They've increased the membership from 186 people to 300. They're positively cash flowing $40,000 in the revenue, which they've never done since 2002 or whatever it was, and it's going in the right direction. So the cost, this jump looks like a large jump, and it is, but when you're trying to service 114 more members from where it was, which is about a 70% increase or 80%, is substantial. So they need the extra person. GME was going to walk away from this contract if they couldn't get that money for the extra person. And they've proven themselves over and over again, and things are going in the right direction. The golf board, made up of 7 members, is happy with it. And, you know, for you to just take the one little snippet out of there and then try to make an issue of it just isn't reality. It's not. And the $121,000 that the city is putting in is for the bonding stuff and the improvements that was well before them. That was approved by the city council. And that's where the majority of that money is coming from, that the city's putting in for that new parking lot, the upgrades in 2006, was that, Mike?
To the clubhouse, yeah.
To the clubhouse.
Well, and the
So-
capital equipment that's been purchased.
And some of the capital equipment, which for many years wasn't, which we, until the last couple of years, hadn't really invested in. I think there was 2 or 3 years there that we didn't invest in any equipment to maintain that. So I think it's, I think it needs to be approved. I'm going to vote yes for it. And I would love for you to have another alternative instead of just no. I'd love to just see you come up with a plan instead of just no,
I did.
no,
I said,
no.
how about meeting us halfway? But
That's not a plan. That's a counteroffer.
I move that we accept the golf.
Second.
Oh, there. Down. Any other comments? David, you're kind of quiet.
No, I was wondering what, when you asked to defer it for a year, you wanted to study something, what were you going to, what was your
to see
thought?
what other kind of things are out there.
We tried that once. We
Nothing.
That'd
didn't
be
find
great.
much.
I think you should.
You
can
yeah.
cancel their contract with 30 days' notice. If you can find something in,
Yeah, you're the one that said it was like you had a gun to your head, so.
oh, I agree. I didn't like having it. Our choice was either a proven company that's moving us in the right direction was going to walk away from this contract because they can't make enough. If you'd like Wade to break it down for you, nobody's getting rich there. Off the contract of where it's at, a lot of that money was going to, you want to break it down, Wade?
I certainly can. I know
Why
we
don't
talked
you?
about
I'd
it,
like to see that. You should do that for Pat, even though we did it.
couple weeks ago.
A week ago. Let's do it again.
Yeah, just, you know, off the cuff, off the top, you know, employment taxes with what an employer pays in federally is in the neighborhood of, it would be in the neighborhood of $7,000 to $8,000. On top of that, there's insurance and work comp, and I'm going off the top of my head because I don't have my data right in front of me. You're talking about another $4,000 or $5,000, and then there's fees and expenses on top of that in the neighborhood of $4,000 or $5,000. So at the end of the day, the 115 becomes 100, and that's what I have to spread out really to 2 people. I think they're well worth it. It can be the existing 2 people we have today, or, you know, we replace those 2 people. I think we have two good personnel that
How many more
are
tournaments
worth-
have you brought in?
Well, we've increased,
Over and above the 140 some extra members.
we've increased the league play by offering an additional league on Monday nights. You have plans to do an additional league coming up this year on Friday and Saturdays. And then we added an entirely new league, a new men's club league that had 10 or 12 events throughout the course of the year. That we're still fine tuning how we manage those events within our regular play. So the golf course was certainly busier this year, which, you know, the maintenance staff can attest to, in, with them trying to get some of their maintenance activities done, so that.
Okay.
I don't see where what they're asking for is not deserved. In fact, I kind of question how 2 people could earn a living on what we've been shelling out for that contract and the benefits that we've gotten, so I don't have a problem with it. And I don't think we should take out Appendix B. We put that in for a reason, And I don't see just because Wade says, well, I'll take it out if you guys insist. I'm not going to insist that they do that. I think it was put in there for a reason, and I want to stay put in there.
I
left in
actually
there.
proposed that to appease Pat's concern about that, thinking that maybe she would feel better about it, but she didn't anyways. So I even told the golf board that, and they felt that it was, and that's really the decision whose it should be, is the golf board. That's why we have these advisory boards to go through the due diligence of that work. And their recommendation was, let's keep it in there. Why wouldn't we incent these guys to even work harder than they already are and improve where they've, more than they've already have improved? So, thank you, David, I appreciate it.
Well said. Thank you.
So that is one of the duties of the golf board? I know the Utilities Commission is a little different, but they're
Or
an
or
advisory
tonight, the
board.
Planning Commission. I mean, that's
What?
why we have these people,
Yeah.
is
I
to
know.
do this due diligence for us.
Any of the boards, park board, doesn't matter.
And as you know, and the park board, we have hard enough time finding people to volunteer for those positions because they are time consuming. And you know it as well as I do, every year we struggle, we have to, sometimes, there's been years where we've had to ask people to fill positions. To take that out of their hands and not give them a say that have an active interest in just that one little segment, to bring recommendations to us, is disheartening for them. And that's part of the reason that we can't find the volunteers for it.
Well, we just went against the Planning Commission's decision.
Pat, you can still vote against it. Even at our budget meeting, I recommended you get on the golf board next year because I won't be here.
Come up with the other plan
And
then,
you come
too.
up with another plan. You can certainly cancel that in 30, and I'll take a look at it.
I'll look at it too. But I was part of it when it initially started, and it's come a long ways from where it was, so just to sit there and throw darts at a few little things is not fair.
Okay.
I just hope we aren't, going to put them so far in debt then because we're doing this,
But we're not.
Who in debt?
slippery rope,
No, it's,
Who are we putting in debt?
Well, by, increasing that so much on 1 year by $25,000.
You mean putting the incentive plan,
No,
or,
the 25,000.
but are you saying you're putting what, you're feeling that it's going to be too big of a nut for them to crack, or
I suppose if that.
is
I don't
that
know
what you're
exactly.
saying, is that you don't think that there's going to be enough, you don't feel that they're going to get enough revenue to cover the additional?
That's how many memberships?
Well, as you well know, as
Actually-
I know, you really don't make money on the memberships as much as you do with green fees.
We took an actual pretty conservative look at what we're going to do with memberships, and in my analysis, don't have any incremental gain in membership growth. We expect to keep the membership at 300, which is where we're at today.
Okay.
and 3 years
We don't want to
ago,
get it too big. I remember when we had 600.
I'd take 600, but
Golf board would approve 600.
Well, I think we all remember the waiting list days too, but those are gone as another golf course is going to close at the end of December, Minnetonka Country Club, so, any other discussion? I know Sean Ryan has made a
What
motion.
happened to the fine dining anyway? We don't have that anymore?
we've tried some things like that to expand our revenue opportunities, and there just isn't, it's just too competitive of a marketplace. We can't compete with people that do this for a living. I mean, we're project managers when it comes to our food business.
Okay. Any other comments? I know Sean did make a motion to approve the contract, and Mark did second it. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
I
Any opposition?
Aye.
Okay, passes 4-1.
And we have to change those two things in the contract? The
Yes.
dates?
I'll make
The
sure in the
dates
final
and Nick
draft.
Peck's name. Shouldn't we put
Yeah,
that in the
we will
motion?
add the changes, if that's okay with you, Sean, your motion?
Yes.
To
that's
correct
fine. Yep.
the golf course operation years, and I think everything else in red, and then add their third person in there, and I guess Wade would have to be the one to dictate the person's name. Okay? Next, the policy. Pat, you wanted to bring this up about the golf memberships
Oh,
on
yeah,
the.
I did, didn't I?
Yep.
Because we said we'd talk about it at budget time, so.
Mhm.
I said, oh, I was gonna bring it up at the workshop, but then I forgot, and,
Well, it was kind of late, too.
yeah. But anyway, I mean, the employee, free memberships. I think we should get rid of them. I don't know, that's my opinion. We don't have them anymore.
Right.
It's not like we're doing something that we aren't doing to ourselves, too. I just think the golf course, isn't doing the best, and I think back in the heydays, that's when we started doing these free memberships, and they kind of got out of control. And even so, I mean, if we would decide to keep them, it should be a tax event, because
Right.
that's what we found out. And there aren't that many people using them anyway, so,
I think Mike said there were 9 people that used them.
City employees.
yeah.
How many did we have that, when you ran the report, was it 8 or 9? I think for 2014, it was 9.
Yeah, it's 9 in the note here, Mike.
Yeah.
It said 9 in the information.
Why are we talking about this? Didn't we already decide this?
That it was going away?
No, you did it for council members.
For council
We
members.
kept putting it off.
Yeah,
Oh.
council members, and then we said we were going to talk about it actually during the compensation
City employees.
study. We were going to
I
talk about
move
the
we do
comp
it for everybody,
Do what?
all city employees, remove it. That's what we talked about doing, so that's what we should do.
What did you say, Mark? I couldn't hear you.
He just said, he
I said
agreed
I
with you.
moved that we remove it for all city employees, because that's what we talked about doing before. I assumed we had already done it.
Oh, and then, but the police have it in their contract, so then that would have to be negotiated out, right?
Right, but I don't think there's any police officers that used it. One? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, Jim's making so much now, he'll pay for it.
Jim's going to cover it, I said?
Yeah, that's what I
a-
heard.
That's what Dave said.
That should help with the memberships. The council isn't getting them anymore, the outgoing golf board members, and possibly the city employees.
Any other comments? I think, Mark, you made a motion?
I'll second that.
Pat seconded that we're going to change the personnel policy that free memberships to the golf course are null and void. And Mike will address that with the police union during their negotiations. Does that sound okay?
Sure.
Okay. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposition? Okay. Good. Next, consent agenda. Anyone have any questions or clarification or anything on the consent agenda?
Nope.
If not, I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Seconded by Dave Brusick. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposition? Okay. Miscellaneous. Patty, you got anything? You got your gloves on already. Well, you can leave then. Go ahead. Bruce? Okay. Glenn?
I've got nothing.
Okay. Ken? Nope. Patrick? James? Mary Jo? God darn, it's one of these days. Mike?
No.
Okay. Pat?
No.
David?
Any word on the armory yet?
The update that I got today is that about a month ago, they had somebody to take a look at the building from the exterior only, made no contact with either Ken or I or anybody from the city, and his conversation with GSA just late this afternoon is that they hope to have some decision out of the GSA by the end of December. Doesn't mean the process is done, but a decision out of GSA.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Okay. Sean?
I have one thing. I wanted to see if maybe Jim could shed some light on the incident that occurred in Jordan, which I found out through your weekly police log that we did send an officer up there to assist Jordan. It was reported on the news that it was a man with a gun pistol whipped or hit a woman that was staying at the temporary homeless shelter at a church up there. That was reported on the news, from my understanding. Is that correct? Could you shed some light on that? And my only concern is that not even 5 months since we approved that homeless shelter for here in New Prague, as some of the other surrounding communities did, I spoke of incidents like this that could happen, and thankfully it sounds like the woman was not seriously hurt, but the man did have a gun, and it could have been a volunteer, it could have been a police officer, and now in reading Jim's report, weekly police report, one of our officers was sent up there. The guy fled after committing the assault stole a vehicle from Jordan. And this was the concern that I brought up 5 months ago when we started talking about the conditional use permit for that homeless shelter across the street from the Mayo Hospital. And we've had an incident, and I would just like to get
We didn't have an incident
All right,
here.
Jordan had an incident
Yeah, okay.
7 miles away, but one of our officers was included in it, and it very easily could have happened here. This is the type of thing that, and it's a slippery slope that I brought it up, and I hate to say that I told you so, but I did. I brought it up. You guys didn't listen to the
But it
concern.
didn't happen here, Sean.
It didn't happen here. It happened 7 miles away, Mark. I understand it, but one of our officers was involved with it and
Sure,
could have
'cause we
been
help
injured.
surrounding
So, and you're right,
communities.
and we should.
Is
Just so
that
you
a
know that
temporary?
happened, and as this comes up and becomes more of an issue, I just wanted to bring it up so you guys are all aware of it, because I didn't necessarily see a lot of news on it. So Jim, is there any light you could shed on it? Okay. Okay. Well, I just think it's a good learning lesson as they come back every year to get approval for the conditional use permit, that you guys keep that in mind. So, that's all I have.
Okay. Mark?
I'm good.
Okay, I'm good. Sounds good. I guess our next meeting is December 15th. Okay. Guess I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Got a second by Mark Bartuszczyk. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposition? Okay, we're out of here. Thank you, everyone.